Okay, ladies and gentlemen, fellow travellers, esteemed guests, friends, colleagues, welcome. Welcome to the Mandalay Hotel this evening. 5 weeks of campaigning, leafleting, meeting our constituents, talking to the press, dealing with hustings, and now a break. A moment to relax, a moment to reflect before the final week's push. Ooh, I'm sorry about that. It's going to be a big week.
That's the BBC.
I might be Channel 4. It's going to be a big week. Spirits are high. We can all feel it. I certainly do. We stand on the brink of election. There's a sense of possibility. There's a sense of change. The air's charged with it. Over the past months and weeks, we've leafleted and knocked on countless doors. We've spoken to hundreds of our fellow citizens, either directly or through our social media. We've shared our vision for better, more accountable government. We've listened to the concerns of our community and we've offered real, tangible solutions. This final week is our opportunity to solidify that connection, to inspire those who are still undecided, and to demonstrate that Reform is the party of action, integrity, and hope. We are not just participants in this campaign. We are architects of tomorrow's success. There's a chap I know, he's a very ordinary sort of chap, the kind you'd bump into down the pub, a bit like Nigel. And he told me that the sort of person that he'd listen to, trust and follow, is the sort of person that can offer 3 things. Those 3 things, he said, they're hope, leadership and adventure. So before Anne issues her clarion call to you this evening, I'm going to try and give you all 3. Before I do that, just a couple of small thank yous I don't want to forget. We are, of course, deeply honoured and grateful to have with us tonight the indefatigable, the irrepressible Ann Widdicombe. Anne's journey to Surrey to stand alongside us is a testament. It's a testament to her enduring commitment and belief in the values that we all hold dear. Anne's presence here tonight, it's more than just a show of support. It's a powerful reminder of the shared dedication and the spirit that fuels Reform's movement. I'd also like to thank my amazing supporters. Too many here to mention, but they've leafleted with me, they've canvassed with me, they've done all the doorstep knocking with me for weeks. Absolutely amazing. I'd like to thank my outstanding and utterly brilliant campaign manager, Neil Locke, who's worked with such diligence. Thank you, yeah. I'm not sure if Neil's made it. I don't know if anyone's seen him yet. But he's done an amazing job to cover a huge geographical area, 35,000 doors and I think around 77,000 constituents, but exceptional job. I'd also like to pay a very special tribute to John Catley. John, where are you? Yeah. Oh, John. John is our best dressed supporter, consistently. But John's also coached me with effortless charm and style on my hustings responses so that I wouldn't make an abject fool of myself. So thank you, John. There's still time. Perhaps most importantly, I'd like to thank my wife and my family for their unending support. This was never their journey. This was never their choice. But they have supported me tirelessly, and I'm forever in their debt. Thank you. But of course, as we gather here this evening, let us remember that our mission is greater than any one individual, even Ann Widdicombe or Nigel Farage or indeed Richard Tice. This is about creating a legacy for our children and grandchildren, about restoring faith in our political system, about ensuring that the voices of ordinary people are heard and respected. So this week, let us redouble our efforts to support each other with renewed vigour and face each challenge with the confidence that we are on the right side of history. Now, back to my agenda, hope, leadership and adventure. Let's do this. Hope. Hope is not just a sentiment, it's a powerful force for change. My personal journey into politics emanates from a very hopeful and optimistic place. I was born, raised, state educated, just on the outskirts of Guildford in Normandy, close to the border with Ash. I was born in 1970. Anne left in 1968. There is no connection between those facts. I'm not going to tell you that my father was a toolmaker. But my parents were good old-fashioned, hard-working and aspirational Tories. They were moulded by a post-war generation who knew how to make a penny and a pound go a very long way. Yeah, it's important, Malcolm. If they didn't have the extra money at the end of the month, then it didn't get bought. Simple as that. So with modest means, they purchased their own home, they raised my sister and I in a loving environment, and they put amazing food on the table, gave us wonderful holidays every year in Cornwall in a caravan on a working farm. Joyful weeks. Every summer was a lot hotter than it is now, in spite of the Met Office telling us that we're seeing record temperatures yet again. Okay, so where were we? My parents' aspiration, their aspiration, and their hope became my aspiration and hope. I was steeped in the stuff from a very young age. Sometimes that did make me a bit reckless, yes, but I knew instinctively I could make it doing anything my heart desired. So, aged 13 and a half, I set up my first business. At Park Barn Comprehensive School in Guildford, now renamed King's Manor, I started making Perspex book stands for the computer department. Dad helped me rig up an old infrared heater with an aluminium jig held in place with some G-clamps. Mum lent me the cash to buy a few hundred sheets of acrylic from a place on Slyfield Industrial Estate, and we were off. The school coughed up, and I was in the money. Well, sort of. There were other ventures. Some worked, quite a lot didn't. But I was always told by my parents and teachers to get up, dust myself off, and start again. Hope, aspiration, a desire to succeed on your own merits, rise or fall, win or lose. But let's be honest, that hope is lacking a little bit these days. Take young people. As an example, too many young people are suffering with mental health issues. Too many kids are trapped in a virtual world of damaging social media interactions. It's not their fault. It's not our fault. But it is our responsibility to restore that same optimism and confidence in them that we had in us when we were young, like I had and you had. We need wealth creators. We need innovators. We need inspired entrepreneurs, kids who are willing to put themselves out there and develop a goal-orientated attitude, knowing that we've got their backs and we're with them all the way. We need more carrot, less stick. The carrot, higher education qualifications, degrees, structured apprenticeships, which actually mean something, and from which they'll actually learn something useful, practical as well, which won't saddle them with a lifetime's worth of debt straight off the block. 30 years ago, as a kid from a modest background, I went to university pretty much free of charge. Today, it's £60,000 to £70,000. How many bright, working-class kids can go to university at those prices? Education, the preserve of the rich, this is hugely retrograde. But no one's shouting about it, apart from reform. What about us as parents? We raise them. We pay for their ice creams, their school books, their iPhones, their clothes, their holidays, so that they don't have to be burdened with these expenses. And then we send them off to do their degrees, only for the universities to load them with debt. Massive debt, uncompromising debt, debts which they'll be saddled with for 45 years whilst paying interest on the loans at RPI plus 3%, like seedy loan sharks, sinister mafia bosses. It's what they are. Like like seedy mafia bosses, the university business model relies on loading our kids with a lifetime's worth of debt, whilst they deliver, in some cases, some pretty dubious quality degrees. The university business model is morally bankrupt, and we are letting it happen willingly, eyes wide open. Reform can and will deliver a renewed environment of hope and optimism for our children and young adults. And we've got a plan for older generations too. Okay, we move on to leadership. Leadership is such an important skill. I've been lucky enough to meet some amazing leaders in my lifetime. And there's quite a few here tonight. I've met a large number of leaders just in the last few months since I've been working with Reform. Welcome, Alistair. Can you find a seat? Come on.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Please, find yourself a seat. Make yourself comfortable. Yeah, leaders. So I've met a lot of leaders whilst working with Reform. Natural leaders, inspirational leaders, entrepreneurs, adventurers, the type of people who don't run for cover when the hard rain falls. My own modest journey into leadership came when I started a small manufacturing business 20 years ago. I had a mentor, a brilliant giant of a man who supported me constantly. He read my tawdry business plans one after the next, exposed the flaws, told me where to improve, and sent me off to do better. Eventually I did, and set up a small manufacturing business building wine cellars. That mentor became my ex gratia chairman, and we travelled and built a small British award-winning business. That mentor is here tonight. Tom, lovely to see you. Thank you. I worked with the prison service for several years. They have a manufacturing arm and supported us with our prototyping. I met a lot of criminals. Some of those inmates were pretty dark characters. Some amongst them were good blokes who just made a mistake. One of those chaps, Warren, was a real-life Andy Dufresne. So you'll all remember Andy Dufresne from The Shawshank Redemption. Of course you will. He was the lead character played by Tim Robbins. I think it was Tim Robbins. Only Tim Robbins was an accountant. This is a true story. Similar to The Shawshank Redemption, Warren, not an accountant, but he was a lawyer in a previous existence. And when I met him, he was serving life in prison. Only in this case for a crime he had actually committed. Warren had been a brilliant lawyer from Lancashire, bright, young, talented, and still just in his mid-20s. But Warren had found himself under significant pressure from his demanding job. He was over-leveraged on several properties, struggling to manage his professional commitments, his property renovations, and I know Warren won't mind me saying this, but he wasn't paying enough attention to his personal relationships. A devastating event unfolded which resulted in Warren setting himself on course for a life sentence, aged just 26. So I met Warren about a decade and a half later, almost at the end of his sentence and due for parole. He was an exceptional craftsman with extraordinary skills, sharp, super sharp intelligence, driven, organised and passionate about his work. Warren has survived some of the UK's toughest prisons using his wits, his wisdom, his guile, immense good humour, and by helping people with their legal issues, just like Andy Dufresne with their accounts. And occasionally in his capacity as chief prison hoochmaker, even though Warren himself didn't drink, and never has, as far as I know. But Warren was actually waiting. He was waiting for life to grant him. He was waiting for life to grant him another chance. And do you know what I realised? I realised that that man could have been me. Turn a different corner, and I could have been Warren. I could have needed that second chance. So with a product, a business, and having jumped through all the administrative hoops to get Warren on board, we had a workshop manager, a small number of employees, and I had become a leader. That company endured for 15 years until the hostile economic environment created by the Tories and ultimately the pandemic undid us. But what remains is that Warren is a fully integrated and productive member of the community, married, running his own business. And what's more, my great friend Warren is sitting amongst you tonight. Warren, thank you for honouring me with your presence. There's another lovely little segue about this story, which I only recently discovered. However, it seems that Warren and Anne actually know each other, as they met under slightly different circumstances, whilst Anne was the UK's prison minister. Anne, of course, a great advocate of prisoner rehabilitation, unlike her then boss, who famously had something of the night about him.
I certainly did, and I wasn't spelling it with a K.
I'll let you expand on that during your speech, Anne. I've digressed, as usual. This was my foray into, as a leader, and leadership is really the cornerstone of what reform represents. We do have the almighty Nigel Farage. We do have the almighty Ann Widdicombe in our corner, but this isn't the half of it. There are at least half a dozen dedicated reform candidates sitting amongst you tonight. Without exception, I've been inspired by these selfless men and women over recent months. Each and every one of them is a truly inspirational leader. Each one of them is utterly committed to taking this country on a new journey, in a new direction, a direction of, yes, you've guessed it, hope, optimism and adventure. Our aspirations are so different from the doom and gloom of the mainstream parties, technocratic neoliberalism, a permanent economic paradigm into which all happiness, optimism and expansiveness gets sucked and spat out somewhere near East Kilbride. The reform candidates which I've had the great good fortune to get to know are visionaries. It was only a few months ago, if you mentioned reform, people would turn away. They didn't understand what we were trying to achieve. They bought into the nonsense that the mainstream media were falsely attempting to portray, that we were a party of the extreme right, untethered, unthinking, dangerous, a party born out of a kind of ethnic nationalism. This couldn't be further from the truth. Reform is a party grounded and centred and rooted in family, community, tax-paying citizenship and hard work. We are an outward-looking party. These men and women who've invited you here today are indeed leaders and visionaries. In spite of the risk to themselves, personally, professionally, reputationally, they've put themselves on the line for all of us. They are all leaders. We are all leaders. And if you follow us, we will take you to a place of hope, where future endeavours can ride high, where young people will find themselves once again supported, where if you work hard and put away for your future, you can be certain that the government won't come knocking for your hard-earned cash simply because they've been asleep at the wheel and misspent your future. So we move on to adventure. Adventure so essential for our minds and souls. I've been on an extraordinary personal adventure for the last 18 months, which has brought me to this place with these people, with Anne and with you all. It's been an honour and a privilege. Sadly, there isn't sufficient time for me to tell you about that journey tonight, but suffice to say, it's been one hell of a ride, and I'm still holding on with white knuckles and a slightly startled look in my eyes. The broader theme of adventure is such a fundamental part of who we are. The backdrop to this general election, the agenda set out by the Tories, by Labour and the Libs, is the antithesis of adventure. It's lacklustre. They are lacklustre. Their manifestos, distinct from Reform's contract, is business as usual. Managed decline under the guise of economic prudence, overseen by adults in the room. You know it, I know it, and they know it. We're being lulled into a false sense of security by these people. They're going to tell us that £2.7 trillion worth of public debt is okay, really. £38,000 per man, woman and child is manageable. They're going to tell us that we need to keep our heads, suck up the burden of the additional taxation, that we need to keep spending on the welfare state and on the public sector. They're going to tell us that we need to adhere to our international legal obligations, dispense with the idea of leaving the ECHR for fear of becoming international pariahs. They're going to tell us that adventure is for someone else. It's not for us. It's not for me. And it's certainly not for you. Lest we want to undermine our economic stability, our dwindling pensions, our precious savings, and 3 square meals a day. Well, Jeremy, we've seen what your idea of stability and managed decline looks like. We've felt the benefits of your soul-destroying suffocating economic policies. They don't work. You are bankrupting our children. Your policies are soul-destroying, spirit-crushing. We don't like them, and we don't want them. Reform have the country's ear now, and we are going in a new direction. Reform wants adventure because we know that it's the spirit of adventure that will rebuild this great country, that will give our children the hope and aspiration to become the wealth creators and entrepreneurs of the future. Reform know that the spirit of adventure courses through the veins of this great nation. Adventure empowers people. It mobilizes people. It rewards people. It fires people up, and it turns them into responsible citizens who want to contribute, who want to play a part, who take title to their roles in society, supporting family, friends and neighbours, because we know that we're all in this together, and we understand that my achievements are your achievements, and that together they become our collective success. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm wondering whether I would like to finish with a short tribute tonight to those people who can't be with us. I don't know if you have family members who had conflicting appointments, or maybe there was someone special in your lives, as in mine, who's no longer with us, but who believed in you and shared your commitment for a better future. If they were still around you, I think these words would resonate with them. So please bear with me just a couple more minutes. I know we're all waiting for Anne to make her big speech. This will be over in an eye blink. It is, of course, the famous poem by Rudyard Kipling, If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there's nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can walk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings nor lose the common touch, if all men count with you, I beg your pardon, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. Thank you for bearing with me whilst I read that. Okay, it is my great pleasure to welcome a truly remarkable figure to our event this evening. Ann Widdicombe, a social conservative of unwavering principles and dedication. She's been a passionate advocate for reform for many years, a former resident of our own constituency in Godalming Ash, and was also an MP for Maidstone and the Weald, a member of the European Parliament, holding several ministerial positions under John Major's government, including Prisons Minister. Famously, she visited every prison in the UK throughout her tenure. Exceptional. And how can we fail to acknowledge her amazing two steps and tangos as part of the lineup on Strictly Come Dancing? Her contributions to political discourse and her relentless pursuit of justice have earned her a well-deserved reputation as one of our most powerful and iconic voices of our time. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a very warm welcome to the one and only Ann Widdicombe.
Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we're going to win, aren't we? Yeah. No, not with that level of energy. No, not a chance. Right, okay. In a minute, I'm going to ask you again, but I want you to picture some things in between. Now, picture the day after the election and picture Nigel Farage going to Westminster. Picture a little group of Reform MPs, maybe a bigger group of Reform MPs, sitting on the green benches. Just hold that picture while I ask you again, we're going to win, aren't we? Yeah! That's more like it. Now, it's that level of energy that we have got to keep up over the next week, and that's all it is now, it's less than a week. Over the next few days, we have got to keep up that level of energy until 10 o'clock on Thursday. 1 minute past 10, it's too late. Doesn't matter what sort of bright idea you've got, or how much energy you've got, no good. 1 minute past 10, no good. But even 1 minute to 10, you might still be getting somebody to the polls. So we've got to keep that up. We've got to keep the momentum up. Now, why is it that we have got that momentum? Why is it that, given that it's only 3 weeks ago when this campaign started, and we were told we weren't going to get any seats, we were going to get a few million votes, nobody ever disputed that, but we weren't going to get any seats, and we were about 9% in the polls. And yet, just 3 or so weeks later, we are at 21% in the polls. And we are predicted to be getting not 6, not 7, but 18 seats. Now, if it's moved that much in 3 weeks, just think another week of real input, real energy, real trying, every last second that we've got to spare, what that can do and where that can take us. Now, nobody is saying that Reform is going to be the next government. I mean, I do believe in miracles. But I haven't got any intimation that he's going to oblige on this occasion. So we're probably going to have to put up with a Labour government. But what we can be, we can't be the government this time, but what we can be is the effective opposition. Yes. And that is what we've got to aim at. And our policies, which underlie that opposition, are based on 2 words: common sense. You know, recently when I was going to make a speech like this, but to another audience, just as I was going up to the stage, I felt my arm grabbed, and I turned round, and there was a former colleague with whom I had served in Parliament. And he said to me, "I've joined Reform." So afterwards, I said, "Tell me all about it. Why did you join Reform?" his reply was instructive. He said, well, after we left Parliament, he had gone abroad for some years. And when he came back, he said, he no longer recognised the country. And I had another moment of revelation like that. When I was up in Blackpool South, you know, that's the seat where we came within 117 votes of the Tories in a by-election. I was in Blackpool South and I went to the Spitfire Museum. And I climbed up into a Spitfire. I mean, I cheated. I went up steps. I didn't do it like the pilots did. I didn't swing up onto the wing and then climb in. But I climbed into a Spitfire and it was very claustrophobic. And I tried to imagine it on fire, plunging through the skies. And I really, really respect the sacrifice and the courage that that generation showed. And so I asked myself, if they were here today, would they recognise the country? No. Now, they fought for freedom. Liberty was what they were fighting for. Liberty was what they were putting their lives on the line for. Liberty was what the folks back home were going through for when they were bombed and blitzed and worried about their loved ones who were actually at the war. Liberty was what it was all about. And yet today in this country, we have no freedom of speech. None. I cannot imagine how those people would feel if they could see now a country in which you can lose your job just because you hold the wrong opinion. They were fighting an entire society based on that. They were fighting that. They were fighting for real liberty, for the ability to say anything that you liked within the law. And yet now we can't do it. And in poll after poll, people admit that they self-censor. They don't actually say what they think because they think it's going to get them into trouble. We should never be afraid to be in trouble merely because of an opinion that we hold. Unless you are deliberately inciting violence or extreme hatred, then you really should not have any qualms at all about saying what you think.
Absolutely.
Would they really recognise a society in which our children are taught in schools that there are 142 different genders? They're only ever going to meet 2 of them. So there really is no common sense at all in teaching them that there are goodness knows how many. Would those people recognise a society in which parents cannot have any input into what the schools are teaching our children in terms of sex and relationships? No input. That used to be regarded as a major parental responsibility. Everywhere you look, we've lost common sense. Now let's look at common sense now, applied not to the nature of society, but to very, very specific problems. Everybody knows, and the government says so, that we don't have enough doctors. Labour say it, Tories say it, Liberal Democrats say it, everybody says it. So what has this government been doing? It has been operating a limit on the number of students who can be trained in medicine. And worse than that, it has not raised that limit. And now, at the gates of a general election, they've suddenly realised and say, oh, we're going to train more doctors. What have they been doing for 14 years? Now, because reform operates on common sense, we have a very straightforward policy. There will be no cap at all, and any student who is academically able enough and devoted enough can be trained as a doctor. But we go further, because we haven't just got a problem of recruitment, we've got a problem of retention. They want to get out of the NHS, and you can't honestly blame them. So what do? We say, well, it's common sense that if you want to encourage a particular pattern of behaviour, in this case remaining in the NHS, you have to give an incentive. Nobody will do it without an incentive. And the incentive that we offer is very straightforward. If after qualifying they spend 10 full years in the NHS, then at the end of that time we will remit all their student debt, and they will effectively have trained for free. Now, and we're offering something similar to the nurses. In that case, we're saying, if you stay 5 full years in the NHS after qualifying, if you spend 5 full years, we will remit 3 years of taxes. And that is a big incentive to anybody considering whether or not to go and work as a nurse in the NHS. It can tip the balance. So those are common sense approaches. And then let's look at immigration. Where is the common sense? In Rishi Sunak saying that he is going to send people to Rwanda to be processed, and that's fine, that's absolutely fair, I've nothing against that, and saying that, and failing time after time after time to get the plan off the ground. Where is the sense in not having a plan B? There's no sense. I mean, the boats are coming in daily. They're disgorging hundreds daily of illegal immigrants, people with no right to be here, people who've come from a perfectly safe country because France is safe, it's under the rule of law, it's a signatory to all the international conventions that we're a signatory to. There is no advantage of this country over France, and they come here daily, and Rishi Sunak doesn't know what to do about it because he's still waiting for Rwanda. Well, we are sensible. We have common sense. And what Reform is saying is we will have a plan A and we will have a plan B. Plan A is we turn the boats round. At the point where they're about to come from French waters into British waters, we say no. We are perfectly entitled under international law to do that. Do not buy any stories that we need to change the law. We don't. We can do that under existing international law. And we can say, no, go back. Before anybody says it's impractical, Australia did it. And more importantly, because it's not very far from us, Belgium did it. And if they can do it, the only thing that is stopping us doing it is having the will to do so. But we have common sense, and therefore we say some of those boats will still get through. They're bound to. Yeah, we've got a very long border. Some of those boats will still get through. Okay, so what do we do? Well, what we don't do is put them into hotels all over the country from which they're free to come and go. Instead of which, we will house every new asylum seeker in secure reception centres so that we know where they are, we can process their claims quickly, and when those claims are refused, we can return them. Now that is something I have been saying since 1999, when, having been Immigration Minister in the Home Office, I then became Shadow Home Secretary, so I knew exactly what I was talking about because I'd seen it. And it was generally recognised within the Home Office by the civil servants and by ministers that the only way you would get a proper deterrent was by secure detention. And the reason for that is this. Why, as I've said, when they're in a totally safe country, do they want to come here? Well, the answer is we're the easiest country in the entire West in which to disappear. And the message goes out there, if you manage to get into Britain, you're very, very unlikely, there's a tiny chance, but you're very, very unlikely ever to be removed. And therefore, that is worth paying a people smuggler for, because you can come to a Western country and you can stay. Why? We don't have national identity cards, we don't routinely practice detention, but we do have a flourishing underground economy. And so when the time comes, when the claims are about to be refused, they can disappear. Change that message and send out a message that says, if you come to Britain with a genuine claim, you have always been welcome. But if you come here with a false claim, you will be detained, you will be dealt with quickly, you will be sent back. Nobody is going to pay £15,000 to a human trafficking agent for that. That is what we've got to do. That is common sense. We have too many people to be housed in our prisons. So what does the government do? This government, at any rate, and I'm pretty certain Keir Starmer's, what does the government do? It says don't send people to prison. Or else it says, better let them out early. I had exactly that situation, so I know whereof what I speak. I know it. And I had exactly that situation when we had a surge in the prison population. Of over a few years, it went up 25%. And we ran out of space. And I did not let people out early. And I did not ask the judges not to send anybody to prison. Instead of that, I brought in extra accommodation. I brought in a prison ship from the United States. Labour derided it as the hulks. Then they kept it for 9 years. Quite useful it was. I brought in porter cabins from decommissioned Norwegian oil rigs and put those porter cabins down in the lower security prisons. All the press was interested in was, did they have en-suite facilities? So I was going to be accused of importing luxury into the prison system. And I even proposed, and was proposing, but for the intervention of the 97 general election, I was even proposing to take over a disused holiday camp. Because you think about it, all the accommodations there, so all you do is put a secure perimeter around. Oh, you do take away the cinema and the swimming pool, but you know, you can... So it's possible. It's possible again with that word that I've used earlier. Will. Will. And Reform has the will. And we will supply the extra prison places, and we will supply the extra police, and we will make sure that they do actually police, rather than fill in forms, and we will make sure that they're visible in their communities, as was once taken utterly for granted. So we will carry out policies based on common sense, which brings me to taxation. Now, what is the point in saying that people should be working and not lounging around on benefits when the tax system penalises them for working? How fair is it that pensioners who have virtually nothing beyond the state pension, bar possibly a modest little occupational pension, that group of pensioners are taken into the tax system? How fair is that? So we say we will raise the threshold at which you begin to pay tax to £20,000. And then, of course, there is business. If we want Britain to be competitive, if we want to attract business, to attract investment, which in turn grows employment in this country. What you do is you compete with your opponents, you don't shadow them. And yet the first thing that Jeremy Hunt did, I lie, oh yes, I know I don't. The first thing that Jeremy Hunt did was he put up corporation tax to the level of France. Now that's your own MP. That's what he did. As I said to somebody today, he's a great chap, I like him tremendously, but he's a rotten chancellor. And the sense of that was what? And then we wondered, or rather they wondered, why businesses like AstraZeneca said, thanks very much, we'll go off to the Irish Republic because it's lower over there. There is no sense in discouraging people, in producing disincentives to business, to growth, to wealth creation. Now you may say after all of that, okay, but how are we going to pay for it? Well, really, it's very simple, and it's also massively complicated. But when the government was confronted with trillions of pounds worth of debt following the COVID episode, it dealt with that by printing money. Got a posh term, of course, calls it quantitative easement, but it means printing cash. They printed money, but they did it in such a way that they let the banks issue the bonds, and then the government pays interest on the bonds. Well, as Richard Tice said, it's a bit like handing somebody a fiver and then saying, oh, and how much interest would you like me to pay? So we will reverse that. And before anybody says we can't, Switzerland has. The European Bank itself has. And even Robert Peston says it can be done. And if he says it can be done, then of course it can be done. So it is perfectly possible to do, and there are already examples of countries who have done it. Now we can do all of that. That will raise billions. We'll raise it from some other savings as well, but that is the big one, and that will raise billions. So we have the money. This is not a Liz Truss style operation. We're not saying here are the cuts, but how are we going to pay for them? We know how we're going to pay for them. We have costed out the policies. We have added up the savings that we can make, and we know that we can cover what is in our contract with the people. And it is a contract. It's not a manifesto. Manifestos are exercises in hope over experience. This is a proper contract. You elect us and we will do that. Now, as I say, we're unlikely to be elected as the government next Thursday, but we really can become the opposition. And when we are the opposition, it will be opposition. It won't be some sort of Vichy arrangement whereby, we utter a bit of rhetoric but actually go along with what the government is doing. It won't be like that at all. It will be a real red in tooth and claw, except we're not the Reds, red in tooth and claw opposition. That's what it will be. Now, it's possible. There's everything to play for. In a minute, I'm going to take questions either on the policies that I've talked about or on any policies that I haven't. But just let me say, if you have a young one at home aspiring to go to university, remember there's only one party promising to abolish interest on their loans. We're honest, we cannot afford, as some of the other parties have promised and then found they couldn't, we cannot afford to get rid of all the tuition fees. But what we can do is to stop the nonsense whereby 80% of students never repay their debt because the interest is growing on it at such a rate that they can't. That is a nonsense. So we will get rid of the interest on student debt. If you've got a young one or you know a young one who's considering becoming a doctor, then remember what we have promised in terms of writing off the student debt. I said that to one of my great nephews. I don't mean he's a nephew who's great, I mean he is actually a great nephew. And I said to him, Sam, do you realise that, he can't yet vote, he's only 17, do you realise that Reform will get rid of your student debt? He said, your student interest. He said, I've already worked that out, Aunt, he said. I don't need it. He said, I'm going to be a medic. I'm going to be an army medic, and the army will pay for it. And he's quite right, they will. But make sure that people actually know what we are offering. I think a lot of people don't realise what we're offering doctors, they don't realise what we're offering nurses, they don't realise what we're offering students. We're about a great deal more than just immigration. We are the party of the future. That is why we have taken off as rapidly as we have. We're talking to people about their aspirations. And don't run away with the idea. I know an awful lot of us here are disaffected Tories. But don't run away with the idea that we're only getting supporters from the Tories. We're not. We're getting them from Labour as well. And the reason for that is the same reason that Maggie Thatcher and Boris Johnson got votes from Labour. We understand their aspirations, and we are offering them policies to bring those aspirations to fruition. Mrs. Thatcher understood that people wanted to own their own houses. She understood that there were very bright children in very poor households who could actually benefit from an independent education. She understood that we could all have shares in British business, not just the very wealthy. And Boris Johnson understood that what the Red Wall wanted was levelling up, that it was sick to the back teeth of everything going to London and the South East. He understood that. We understand it too. And one of our big drives over these last remaining days of the campaign will be to appeal to Labour voters as well as to disaffected Tories. It's very easy to be disaffected with the Tories. It's less easy to be disaffected with Labour because we haven't a clue what they stand for because Keir Starmer won't tell us. So, as I say, we've just got a few days left. We can become the opposition. We can get far more seats than anybody is currently predicting because we've already had a terrific momentum, and that momentum has been earned. And let me say this, yes, ever since Nigel came back, our popularity has gone through the roof, and that's terrific. But I would just like to pay tribute to Richard Tice, who founded Reform out of the Brexit Party and who brought us to the point where, from nobody having the slightest clue what we were about, we came within 117 votes of the Tories in a by-election, where we went from being at 2 or 3% in the polls with nobody having a clue what we were to being 13% in another by-election. He is the one who got us to where we are, and Nigel is the one who is going to take us into Westminster. Yeah.